So, hello, welcome again to Learning Clan. I'm Chris Hutchinson, and with me today is
Teemu Vaalasmaa. I work here in Planet as a Chief Product Officer, so dealing a lot with what we do on our platform.
yes, my boss. Yeah.
Indeed,
Yeah,
you better agree with me.
Exactly. Well, today's topic is AI, responsible AI and learning, and I guess something that I've been kind of looking forward to because this has been all over the news lately. Everyone's either excited, terrified, intrigued, especially with specifically like the GPT and ChatGPT outputs.
Indeed.
So we figured it's a good time to talk about what we feel is responsible AI use, or maybe what the role of AI in learning and education will be going forward in the future. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, I think it's been very difficult to avoid hearing about AI ever since maybe last October, November, when sort of images started popping up, and then soon after that, I think the ChatGPT is probably the most accessible AI tool that anyone can just open up and try it. There's no instructions required. You can ask anything and see what happens and so on. So
Yeah.
I think compared to like previous years and times,
Yeah, it's been certainly remarkable, and I think what they've done is quite interesting in that they've tooled the system in such a way that almost no matter what the input, the output is impressive. It's not
Yeah.
necessary, and I think that's like maybe one of the points that has caused like reactions and maybe a degree of hysteria is that the outputs are undeniably impressive no matter what.
yeah,
They're not always really correct,
indeed.
which is one of the hang-ups where people get
Yeah.
reasonably concerned.
Yeah, I think like if you look at how social media reacted and LinkedIn, like professional networks to AI, was of course first being really excited that hey, you can ask for anything and it's going to be able to summarize you or present like code snippets and stuff like that. And I think quite soon after that, maybe on the third or fourth day, people tried to start breaking it. They tried to see like, all right, if this works, then what are the things that doesn't work? What are the places where actually the outputs might be dangerous or very much incorrect, and where definitely you shouldn't trust what you're seeing from there. So I think that cycle began quite quickly, and there was quite a reaction there on
Yeah.
people being sort of like, all right, are we ready for this? Is this ready for us? And all these sort of things. So yeah, I think it's a good time to discuss a little bit how in education definitely we feel about it and what we
Yeah.
think are the pros there and what are the cons, and maybe at least personally having been involved with different AI things in the past, I think what are some of the key differences that are different this time compared to previous attempts to sort of offer the help of machines to improve learning results and learning in general.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess like let's start then with like these reactions to it
Yeah.
in the education world. I'm sure like you're aware as I am that one extreme one was some schools have banned it. Apparently,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah.
accessible on devices or networks, and I mean I think it's fair to say we're opposed to that. I think that's maybe like overreaction.
Yeah, that is like, I think it's sort of a very understandable that if things move very quickly, then you just pull the brakes and prevent the use of it. But it just, I don't know, imagine how much there is things that you can do with it if you think outside of just exams. I think people instantly didn't see as a like a learning tool to be used in classrooms when you're, for example, dealing with computer science, or you're dealing with concepts that you don't quite grasp, but you can see an example generated by AI, and then you can look at it, you can see if it's actually correct, does it match what you're actually learning here, and you can
Yeah.
always ask from the teacher like, hey, I got this response, what is wrong here? Is this correct or something? So it is very, maybe it tells something about our culture that we instantly went to the space of trying to see that how does this break our culture of measuring and exams and everything. So
Yeah.
that is of course a bit sad thing. And I don't know. And what is sort of like the funny thing is that the earlier versions of GPT, for example, have been publicly available for quite a long time and nobody cared. But because like you could always ask from GPT, but it was just a bit more difficult. You would have to use APIs and so on to play with it. But you could already do a lot of the things you can do now. But of course, now that it's easily accessible and it's even better, then suddenly it becomes a thing that you need to be scared of. And I think what I at least wrote down for myself, that what I would like to discuss is the reactions from teachers is, of course, they're instantly thinking from the student's point of view, but not how AI can help them instantly in their own work. Instead of having to be master in every domain, you could easily do much more better things and quickly, instead of having to spend all the time writing down notes for yourself and so on.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And maybe like a related anecdote was, I think the best reaction to it getting shut down or banned in some places that I've seen was, I think he was a Cambridge or a Harvard professor, some Ivy League, well-renowned, well-respected professor. He, as his reaction to it, made GPT mandatory in every class.
Yeah.
So he just really quickly adapted his teaching style, his lesson format, and instead of, go off and research this thing, it was, hey, figure out how to ask ChatGPT for outputs on this thing, and let's all bring them back together and like look at what we got and examine what the tool did differently, what it was good at, what it was poor at. And I think that was really interesting because it, first of all, shows zero fear of these. It's an embracing of the system on these levels, like teacher level, but also learner level, and teaches them. So they're learning two things when they're doing that. They're learning about the subject they're asked to report on, and they're learning how to use this tool as a tool to support their learning process, and not as a workaround to doing the actual work. So I thought that was like a really perhaps leads into responsible AI use. So one of the ways that it can be approached in as an advantage.
Yeah, I think like one of the earliest memories I have of Wikipedia back in the day in school, I remember like doing some Google search for a school presentation or something, and back then it was quite common that you had to go to library to get some books to source your material on it. And then I remember showing like Wikipedia, and teacher was like, yeah, you can't use that, like anyone can write anything to the internet and you shouldn't trust it, like I'm not gonna accept any of your like sources to come from this place. And nowadays I would say that like having some information in Wikipedia is behind quite a structure of people making sure that your sources are correct and so on and so on. And I think the general trust around Wikipedia is like quite high, and it's being tested again and again every year to see how many incorrect articles and everything is in there. But that was sort of like, hey, this information is too easily accessible, you can't trust it. And I think it's the same with AI currently, especially with this. And the funny thing is, of course, that it uses pretty much Wikipedia as one of its sources, in addition to all like internet conversations and news and so on.
Yeah. So, okay, so we've sort of covered like a bit of the history there with it and some of the ways that it's positive, but like we've said this term responsible AI a few times. So like, what does that mean to you, at least?
Yeah, I think like probably it has a lot to do with what we already discussed, is that it's not a direct source. It's something that you have to validate manually anyways. I think, at least from my own experience, like structures and that sort of things that it provides are valid. You just have to make sure that what's inside the structure is just something that makes actually sense, and it's not confusing different topics or generating like nonsense around specific item that you have maybe made a mistake in your prompt or something else. So yeah, I think should be critical, like always. I think we both have grown up in a version of internet where you need to be skeptical about anything you read and hear while browsing there. So it feels like, I don't know, like talking about responsible AI means like being responsible for any information you collect and utilize. But I think in the responsible area, there is that whole different side of like what is responsible use for it. I think like where you should replace humans with AI and so on. So maybe that's a different side to that coin.
We'll expand on that. Like, what's a responsible use?
I think like applications in education, I would feel very bad if all of the feedback and everything would be just handed over to AI. Like you would never hear from your teacher. You would only hear sort of a language model giving you some standard feedback. I think that would take away a lot of sort of what is important about feedback and how
And the
it's personal.
teacher-learner relationship.
Yeah.
Like we value that so much. So
Yeah, so that's maybe a part. I'm not so worried about like somebody making an effort and writing an essay using ChatGPT, because they still have to learn the topic. They still have to read it. They still have to check that it makes sense or doesn't include nonsense. So you're actually doing a lot of learning when you're taking part in that. But if somebody just utilizes full conversations or feedbacks to AI, I don't feel that that's very responsible way of working in there. Maybe some quick feedbacks based on multiple choices and so on, but I would be equally as worried of receiving feedback from my essay that I had put manual time in and making a big effort getting those books, writing down a full academic paper, and then hearing feedback from AI. I would be at least disappointed.
Feels a little unfair.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, again, other advantages popped up in my mind. I was just thinking about, there are so many situations where, like what you said, you still have to do the work. So I'm thinking of someone with some kind of like learning disability or like, like who's dyslexic, who writing just takes 4 times as long.
Yeah.
Is it fair that, where those kind of law, and so like, what's the advantage there? The advantage there is that people don't have to struggle with formulating really, really nice sentences, or sometimes it's getting the first page down is a huge thing, and that can help ease that process for people.
Yeah, I think that's a bit unfair, because if you look at that, somebody who has a learning disability and would like that help of getting like a structure in place, getting those paragraphs in there, reading those through, adding your own comments and inputs there to be actually able to do a 10-page essay. But at the same time, nobody's criticizing that pretty much everybody's using spell checker in Word or in your Google documents and everything. You get a lot of input based on your grammar, I think.
Grammarly is a good example, actually. Think about that. Like, that's an AI tool that makes your writing, sure, you have to do the writing, but it makes it, if you've ever used it, like, it makes it so much better in terms of phrasing, and it's really tuned to those things. So is that, like, you could make the argument that it's similar to using something like GPT.
Yeah. So I think that's the sort of like place, if we are starting to look at some tools like too critically, even though everybody's benefiting already from some of these tools, then it becomes kind of, I don't know, weird situation and not really a fair one.
Okay, so we've been dancing around it. Let's try to think of some examples. We talked about it as like, how is it an advantage for educators?
Yeah.
For the people doing the training. So let's, like, what do you think are some places where this offers that?
Yeah, I think, well, from like history point of view, it's funny to see that the sort of like disappointment around AI has been quite huge, because in a lot of those cases where previously AI has been used, like content recommendations and that sort of things, they haven't been felt as something that adds value. People don't get really excited that they get a good recommendation, because, well, they still have to study it, and the context itself is not probably that motivating or exciting. So I think what is really interesting about this time is that it's going from like understanding something that exists and maybe aggregating it into a different format. We are now at a point where you can create things. You can use it as like a channel for your creativity. You can use it to inspire you. So I think that's the sort of thing we here at least really like. It's kind of like skipping the problems we have with a lot of people in education. Limited resources. I don't think there's a person out there who would say that I don't want to make 5 great learning programs available to my customers or my learners, but what they say that it's not just possible. I don't have the resources. I don't have the tools or the time or the means or the budget to create the content, create the pictures, create the videos, audio recordings, whatever you need to do like a modern learning program. So I think that's something that's exciting. It has removed that barrier from people, the barrier of entry for a lot of people who simply like, man, if I had the time, I would make a great course out of this.
Yeah, it's well, there's two things you said that I really liked, and one is this, if people had time, and the other is that it's this sort of tool for your creativity. I think that's a really good way to be viewing this sort of technology, and how that relates to like the time thing. I'm thinking of, if we look at modern like working culture, for example, continual learning is always coming up. Every leading company, every new company, this is something that they understand is part of the working culture, cultures of learning. But I think something that we certainly see working, in the industry we do, is that a lot of businesses just don't have the dedicated resources to for someone to be documenting, hey, where are the skill gaps here, and where can we build, collecting that information is relatively easy, but actually turning that into, if it's the HR department or the L&D department, like it's often a lot of competing things, and making courses takes time. But if you could, collect that list of skills gaps every 6 months and say, okay, there are 3 top ones we're going to tackle, and, hand it off to GPT. I mean, we've done some experiments with like mega prompts or other just like ways of asking it, hey, can you give me an outline on what a course for, social media post like a pro, simple small things or even complex things. And I think that really offloads that burden. Right? Then it's just a matter of, okay, we need to collect a few more resources and put everything together, but the conceptualizing work or a large portion of it gets offloaded. So it can accelerate this culture of learning and the sort of learning community and available resources.
I think like
companies.
In those cases, if you think about it, that how many different tools, if we're talking about like companies doing learning, they have a lot of tools that help them with a lot of stuff. Like you have your CRM, your ERP systems that basically like make sure that you don't have to have that one person who physically has all the papers and contact details where you go and ask for them and they hand those over, but instead you have that system in place. So in the same way, I think we start to get there where we get that help from something that you can actually get those programs up and running. Like you have that thing there. That's going to help you with content creation, creativity, that sort of things. Because if you think about the way, for example, that videos are essential in modern online learning, everybody wants to watch videos because they give you that freedom of like maybe just listening to the audio or looking at from your small screen, and you can pretty much get the idea from there. It's more engaging. It gives you keeps you glued to the screen better in some cases. But if you think about if you want to do a video, you gotta get a decent camera, you gotta get a tripod, you gotta get the lighting, you gotta get all of those things going on before you can film that 2-minute clips of you welcoming people to your company or like giving that presentation about specific subject matter and so on. So there's so much like pre-work, and then you still have to go in front of the camera or pay someone to go in front of the camera. But I've seen good examples of like fully automating that process. You create that sort of like learning content utilizing ChatGPT, and of course what you already know about the topic. You turn that into audio file, and you turn that into a video that has a fake person there, sort of speaking the audio and everything.
Person.
Yeah, and then you use simple one click of a button, and you have it available in 5 different languages.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can do within a day versus of actually getting that organized. And I've seen so many learning programs being stuck to the part where they just get the videos up and running. Yeah.
So that kind of also makes me think, because this is very like praise kind of talk. Look how great, and I'm always sort of hesitant of that. So what do you think are the pitfalls that come along with that? Like, because I think it's very easy to transition from there into basically having a not very good product at the end because you're just relying on it. So
yeah, I think like what it's good at is like citing generally available information. That's where your generated like quick presentations and essays are good enough, because you know that, hey, just listing down some basic facts from quite a simple topic, then you don't have to do it. You don't have to like go around and look for it. But if you start to get into like opinions and more complex things, and of course with the limitations of time frame, you can't ask ChatGPT about things that happened last week because it's not aware of those things. It hasn't been part of their the training of the model. So I think in those cases, those are definite pitfalls where you try to utilize the thinking part away from yourself, because you gotta know what you already were referencing to, like those prompts. You gotta know what you're looking for to be able to take that advantage of it. If you ask already like, what should I tell? And please explain that specific thing to me, you've already sort of lost the control from the information flow, because you're already like out of your own expert area way too much, and you're relying on like 2 steps of generated information, so it might get a little bit sketchy around that time.
Hey, this is really interesting actually, because this is kind of getting into the idea of these prompts that we use. So there's 2 steps of I don't know, maybe expand on that a little bit, like this idea of 2 steps removed generative information versus 1 step. What do you like?
Yeah, I think like if you don't know what you're asking, it's kind of scary to act based on those results. So I still believe that there is definitely that requirement for pedagogical knowledge. You can't like just hand over your pedagogical thinking into just a tool that's going to do it for you, because you got to know what you're asking for. You got to know that you're already on the sort of right path. You just need a bit of help there. You need some bridges, you need some information and so on to get moving forward. So I think that's the part where like if just taking a people from the street and trying to generate learning programs based on it, it gets like real iffy. And I think the best best showcases of those are all the AI generated videos on YouTube that are sort of like, yeah, I gotta see what they are doing here, what's the information, but the information it doesn't have value in it. It's just some like nonsense that has been put together, and it doesn't like actually relay anything, or doesn't provoke any thinking from the viewer and so on. So I think those are some cases where you just go ahead and, what is a trending topic? All right, let's pick a trending topic. Let's use this trending topic to generate something out of it, and then use that to generate something based on it. Then we're sort of like missing that whole thing, like what was I doing in the first place?
Right. Yeah.
But what do you think, like, you work with a lot of people who create courses, you try to help them get their programs up and running. Do you see that like they have the mindset or skill set to take advantage of AI? Because there's definitely something there that you need some pre-existing knowledge to jump in.
I think this is part of the job of people such as ourselves and others working in, particularly I think in the education and learning fields. It's a new technology, it's a new tool. and I think it's largely up to people like us to figure out how the strategies for best applying it. I think a lot of people are quite capable of it. And this kind of also relates to what you were saying, that human element. So it's very good at generating an outline for this module. You know, I can tell it the topics are X, Y, and Z. Please write me an introductory paragraph that like tells how we're going to look at this or something. It's really bad at knowing who your group of learners are.
Yeah.
What sort of tone do they like? What sort of order should this come in for them? What are their, what is their previous knowledge? Like how to tune those outputs. So I think that's like very much still the people part that we need and using this tool. And I think I think a lot of them are good at that part. And the next step is just providing them the information and the knowledge that they need to use these tools quite well. So like, yeah, I think the people generally, I think anyone's capable of it. It's really just a matter of figuring out how to apply it in the best way.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure you've been rolling around and seen like all the mega prompts. For like 3 weeks, all I saw was mega prompts.
Yeah.
And these are these like very large sort of prompts without even asking a question of GPT. It's sort of setting up or any tool like GPT, setting up the framework. So they often include like its role, who the learner and what the subject is, and like what kind of instructional strategy they're using. So this is a flipped classroom learning, or this is a blended course. And it usually, again, like it'll include topic, context, and some other things like, can you make some examples? Can you include an activity? This is like these page-long sort of things. And then you plug in your subject or whatever little missing pieces are there. And I tried a bunch of them with like really mixed results.
Yeah.
So that's like an exciting part of this discovery, is like figuring out sort of backwards engineering, like, okay, how does it actually interpret? How do these tools interpret our requests? And where do they place the value? And how can we like game that essentially? How can we like manipulate that system to get outcomes that we're after?
Yeah. I think it was already before the end of last year when you started to see sort of like AI whisperers that were able to provide services. Like you ask them the question and they're like, all right, I'm going to be the person who creates the prompt to ask the question from AI. And I remember having this conversation and we were laughing about it, like, oh yeah, that's something, like that's a way to jump the like,
gonna be a profession, a prompt engineer.
Yeah.
AI prompt engineer.
And then suddenly what I realized that actually when we've been developing our sort of AI tool to help educators, we've actually become the AI whisperers ourselves. Like I would say that
of this.
Yeah, so this Planet being sort of that tool that adds value with AI but with that human touch. So I think suddenly, I think we are those people right now. I think, or at least on the path of becoming those people.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
honestly, I'm okay with that. But yeah, like I'm happy you brought it up. I didn't know if we were going to bring up our thing in this podcast, but it has been a really interesting process working to develop tools to find that kind of balance, find those places where we can put it in a responsible way, and not just like, oh, this is responsible in here, but reliable. I think that's the other really big challenge that we've found, is that you can put in 20 of the same or similar prompts and get great outputs, and the 21st is going to be absolute garbage because you changed 3 or 4 things. So how to also get that consistency and reliability out of it is I think another challenge that opens up with this whole field.
Yeah, because what we definitely quite quickly realized that prototyping internally our tools and ways, like what should we? Well, we quite quickly figured out that all right, this is what we want to do. We want to help people to create great courses. Remove that first extra step of trying to figure out like where do I start with this thing. And what we realized that we need better tools ourselves first. Like we need help to create those prompts. We need to make sure that when we are requesting information, we can already ensure that it's done at least in a good way. Not maybe the best possible way. There's always room for error when you start adding like user inputs there, but standardizing the process. And I think we sort of internally live that life cycle of going from like, okay, this seems a bit sketchy and complex into like, so I just write it here, right? And I get the course. So I think that sort of a life cycle is very motivating for me, because I feel like when I was asking about like what do you feel about the capabilities, I think we now have the tool that people actually have the capabilities for, but we have that way of working with our customers that they get that help, they get that sort of like a reassurance that hey, let's try this together, let's see what we can come up with this, and here are the exact parts where it's going to help you a lot. So yeah, I think like going from this like feeling that oh no, this is something very complex again, and how are we going to ensure people don't just like ask stupid questions from the AI and get stupid answers and so on, like how to sanitize this whole process. It's been really interesting to see. But yeah, is there something that you think that when it comes to like AI assisted creation, do you think, well, marketing has been very obvious, like so many marketing emails, SEO, improvements, blog posts, ads, and those type of things, they have been really buzzing around like ChatGPT and sort of like AI generated content. But what do you feel about like, is education going to be one of those as well? Like within next year, is education going to be like, hey, this is crucial thing in your toolbox and not just like a nice to have, or sort of a just for those, I don't know, super motivated or technically inclined people are able to use this specific tool. So what do you think about that?
I think it will have to be. I mean, honestly, it feels like, you know, the early 90s when like people were like, what is this internet thing? That'll never, you know, like it's just ridiculous to try to do anything without it.
Yeah.
It will absolutely fundamentally change, has changed, and will continue to change the landscape of these things, without a doubt. So we better learn to use it well. Yeah. And I think that's the growing process that we're in right now. But of course, because just the you know, let's take outlining a course, writing an introduction and an outline. Even if you know the topic really well, so you're an expert in the topic, you like writing, and you have the time, I'd say at minimum that's still going to take any expert a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Just for writing, and you know, oh, is that sentence? No matter how good you are, you're going to go back and be like, maybe that's not correct. Like it will take time. So if you can get that same output in 5 minutes, and then edit it in another 10. You've spent 1/4 the time that somebody else. You could do 4 in the time that it takes you to do 1. Yeah. So I think it's just it's no brainer that this will be. It's if you don't learn to use it, you're going to be missing a massive competitive edge. And even though it's learning and education, like I generally like to think that competitive edge is not so much of a thing in there, but it is. It's still at the end of the day a business, whether it's the business of educating the youth of a society or a population, or it's educating workforce. Yeah, it's still, you know, we still have to deliver results, and people still have to be getting educated. Yeah, and this is just going to change and improve how we get educated. So yeah, it has to be used.
I think something that kind of like puts my mind at ease with this is that just a couple of years ago, like running a Teams like meeting as a lecture or a training or whatever, that used to be a special tool in somebody who's very technically inclined in their toolbox.
Interactive whiteboard.
Yeah, and that used to be something that like, all right, we're gonna need this one specific person is gonna come over, create the meeting, send out the invites, and then like ensure that the camera is on and do like all these special things. There used to be a dedicated person at the university ensuring that video lectures actually work. And now that I look at like people working in education spaces, um, they not just use Teams, but they use like whiteboards, they use Google Forms to create quizzes, they use all sorts of different learning platforms, they are able to use H5P, content creation, and so on. So they have suddenly adapted like a big bundle of tools that previously was just a tiny portion of like teachers using in current facility. So I think that sort of gives me hope that there's an actual opportunity to make difference by providing these tools. Like adaptation of different tools has been better than I expected. Of course, like moving over to remote learning did a lot of good things for digital learning in general. It made it not just a cost saving measure, but actually like, hey, some things are just better to be done online, which is of course very good for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that gives me a lot of hope. Though you brought up like different examples of who are actually running these trainings. So what do you think about who is going to be sort of mastering this and the use of tools if you compare like organizations like companies and so on who are educating their workforce, they're offering trainings, content to help their employees improve themselves, or what about like more traditional learning like universities or elementary schools, primary schools, whatsoever? Which one do you feel like is going to really get the most out of this? Like, is it that normal teacher, or is that somebody working in HR gonna be the?
That's a complicated question, and I think that we got to consider timelines in terms of the response. The private market will take better advantage of it earlier. It's just generally better at adopting things quickly. There's a lot more motivation to learn. As to who it will be in companies, I think eventually everyone. I think there was reason for every department. My friend the other day needed a SQL query and asked ChatGPT, like it was an obscure query, and asked GPT, hey, could you do it? It didn't give him the exact thing. He could see the error, but it gave him what he needed to correct. So like that's just one example of it'll be cross-departmental, and it'll be finding the ways that each of those departments, that might be the HR or L&D departments of places, will I think should be maybe the first ones to get a really good handle on it, and can then teach other departments how it's beneficial, how they can use it. But I think long term, I think it should be in education. Just the way that we're now moving to, like computational thinking and programming is coming into primary education. Like at a very young age, we're sort of saying, look, these are almost fundamental skills, almost like reading and writing. And kids entering school now, who will be leaving in 15 years, they need to know at least some basic understanding. You don't have to be a pro at it, but they need some basic understanding the same way you do with mathematics or any of these things. So it's going to have to become part of the curriculum, but that's obviously going to be a much longer process. We need a generation of teachers who are really enthusiastic and engaged with these things, and I think the younger generation of teachers entering the workforce now is kind of that group, or at least the first part of that group, who are going to be using it really regularly. And so, now we're talking more like a decades process where it becomes sort of fundamental. And I think by the end of that, discussions like the one we're having right now will be just kind of like almost kind of cute, like, look at them back in the day, because it'll be so tied into our sort of daily operation.
Yeah, I don't know if my take on this is more of a hope or a prediction, but I think from my point of view, tools like what we are going to be providing and AI in general in education space, it's going to be helpful for those who have been sort of left alone to do education. This means that you're working in HRD in a small to medium size business, and you realize that, oh man, like if the people here working would know these 6 things, but I don't have the tools, I don't have the budget, I don't have anything to sort of educate those 6 things for these people. But maybe if I can get some help, maybe if I can get that content creation help, maybe if I can get that structure, that idea, that introduction, that would be doable. So even like smaller units who normally don't have resources to deal with learning related issues due to like budget or time constraints, they would be able to create that training around effective meeting practices. They could create that training about creating videos much quicker. And I think the same sort of applies to school. There might be teachers all over the world who have to teach, history, math, and I don't know, philosophy at the same time. And this means that you don't have time and resources to produce content and meaningful exercises and topics and that sort of things for all of those different subject matters that you need to be dealing with. But if you can get some help, you can actually gradually improve all of those 3 areas, which typically would be that one person in a better resourced school would be able to spend all of their time just focusing on history. But because you work in a small school, maybe in a remote area with like very limited resources, you need that extra help to provide like even better quality teaching in those 3 specific areas. So that's at least something that I keep in mind when thinking about these things, is that it's that extra hand. I think we call it the co-pilot.
Yeah.
In the same way there's been with GitHub's like coding co-pilot thing. It's that the AI is sort of like, it's your co-pilot. It's going to give you some tips. It's going to fill those gaps that you currently have. It's going to give you some information to put in there, some pictures, some videos, some audio to put in there. So that's definitely something that I see the current value being there. Maybe in the future it can be more not human oriented that much, so they can do things on their own, but that might still be quite a far ahead in the future, and we go back to these responsibility things, like can we just let it run its course, and sort of like thinking about AI being fully in charge of organizations like learning needs, that it would just like build this platter of courses, it would generate some content there and so on without any human involvement.
Yeah.
That's a thing to consider. But I mean, before that, it's gonna be the guy sitting next to you, helping you out with like, oh yeah, maybe you should press there. Yeah, don't use that tool. You can get the information from there. I think that's the best value currently, and we should look really closely into software engineering space, where now they are, I think a lot of people there are using GitHub's Copilot to help them do like mundane things, like if for the 5th time in a day you gotta create a specific type of database or a table or a red button on your web page that flashes when you click it, you might as well automate it. Like you can just ask for that specific thing without having to do it again and again. So this means that in education space, we should also look for that similar sort of like that quick thing that's going to help you. And there's so much value there. And this content generation is just one side of it. Maybe in the future, we can go back into like analytics and understanding results of learning and utilize AI in there. But I think for now, this sort of like help with creation and so on is the interesting one. It's something that people find actually something that they can use. And yeah, what's going to happen next is going to be pretty much up to what's going to be happening with this current sort of trend in AI.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You kind of, I think, touched on one of my fears there. And I like the co-piloty thing. I like this kind of approach, this responsible use. I think one of my fears is that people get over enthusiastic with it, and it becomes not just the content generator, but it's also looking at the learners and recommending unique content. Like that sounds great.
Yeah.
Totally adaptive learning for each individual. I think we're a long way off.
I think so too, because then the issue is that if we have the the same AI generating content and then validating content. I don't know, we are sort of like losing our own control over things.
Yeah, and it's kind of like who controls the controller sort of question, right? It's, you don't really want it creating and authenticating itself.
Yeah.
It seems like a conflict of interest to me.
Yeah, and maybe this is the like short time period where like AI in the extent of like GPT 3.5 is actually available for free for anyone. Before it goes behind a permanent paywall and it becomes sort of a thing that you gotta invest in that you don't necessarily have always available. It's something that rich students have access to, but the poor students are not able to pay their whatever AI subscription and so on. And especially because what is really great about these things being online is that when you're doing these things on your own computer, it's very much limited by the hardware resources you have available. My poor computer couldn't run probably not even a very dumbed down language model, let alone like something like GPT. So I hope it doesn't become a situation where it's not available for everybody, it's only available for some, and we don't do this sort of like responsible AI thing where we think about the implications and so on, and then we're gonna be in a weird place with all of that. Yeah.
So there's a couple of really interesting things there. I mean, first of all, I think I would agree that we're in a really kind of special or unique time with this, where it is out there, it is free, it is available, and everyone's. I think that a lot of the decisions we make now and a lot of the directions that individuals choose to pull it in are going to, at least the ones that succeed, are going to really lay the groundwork for how these things are used in the future. So it's certainly something to be mindful of and considerate when making tools or using tools or even or just incorporating it into your working life. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I think this is like this point in time is very great that we as individuals, but also as a company, are able to actually get into these things and try different things, and there are information available and great hype around it. It feels like something, I don't know, back in the days when YouTube was free and no ads and everything, you could put anything there before they figured out that maybe it's not copyright thingy, but but I mean, like, it's sort of like everything is now open, and what it makes it of course good is that competition keeps things live. Somebody else is gonna try to do that thing. I think especially in the image creation niche, you could start to see those much more professional, like Midjourney, that allowed you to use much more parameters when you're requesting images than, for example, these OpenAI models
like
allow
DALL-E
you to use. So this competition is gonna be.
What was the one you just mentioned?
Midjourney.
Midjourney. I don't think I've played with that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think that's something that gives a bit of a glimpse into being what sort of like very professional content creation can be like, because you can fine tune like different values there by providing like, this is worth 2, this is 5, this is 1, and that sort of things that might be difficult when you're doing text-based entry and you don't quite know how to formulate things.
Yeah. So that makes me think, do these tools that allow you very fine-tuning, does this eventually go down the road where, like, let's say all learning content on a course is just, so, you're saying, hey, edu AI, will you make me, 5 different contents, an introduction, a deep exercise, and an activity and a test on this topic, and just, like, I don't know. Is that a thing we want to go down? Is that... it feels like it's far away, but then again, it's maybe not that far away.
Yeah. I feel like in a good way and in a bad way, I think AI is can provide a solution for maybe the 3 biggest problems that we have experienced when looking at like organizations running their learning efforts. First being that resources, like you can't have a person hanging around in the learning platform all day looking at what people are doing and being responsive. Second is that you don't have resources to create enough content there. So that means that if you want to create that program, going back into one of the first topics we discussed, it's going to take you months to build that program, launch it, to have it look good and have it be like a pedagogically valid course. And third being sort of like understanding the learning analytics and results and understanding like, all right, they did this course, what did they actually learn, where did they struggle, what is the competence profile coming out of this program. Those are three questions that I at least get asked a lot and what we talk about with our customers. In a way, AI can, in its current state and form, already provide a lot of help with that. It can be that active sort of a teacher there on the platform who does interventions automatically. When it sees that like, all right, you haven't been really active for 2 days, that AI is going to do that intervention and send a message with that hardly generated automated feedback.
How are people going to react to that?
Yeah,
like,
it's going to be scary.
I personally would not. So this is another one of those interesting things. It can do this. It can probably do that quite well.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, it's almost like the update your software notification that you get every other day on your when you open your laptop. Like, how many times are you like, oh great, I'm going to listen to this? Like, we ignore it. Yeah. So my concern is that, you know, with a system like that, it might not really matter. Like, there's accountability. I don't feel accountable to a program. I would feel accountable to a person. So if my teacher or my whatever HR development director is like, hey Chris, like, you didn't do anything on this program this week, what's up? Yeah, I would be much more likely to respond about that and feel some sort of sense of guilt or responsibility for not fulfilling my commitment. Yeah. So that's like, I don't know, what's the balance there?
Yeah, I think going back a few years, chatbots and different like bots in education were a big thing, and they were seen as some sort of like, hey, you don't have that teacher to be there to create the quizzes. You can have this bot there answering if a student has a question. Ask the bot, don't bother the teacher. That was very trendy, and there's a lot of startups and companies in education technology offering this service already. But I haven't seen that being such a huge hit. Maybe exactly for those reasons that you mentioned, that it would still require me to open up the bot and ask that question and so on. And yeah, so that's sort of an area that I haven't, at least personally, felt like it's something to solve. Maybe just because you can't so easily replace the humans in that part. But maybe if you make those second and third problems much more convenient with AI, like that content creation we've been talking about, and then understanding the results and analytics, maybe using AI to help turn different graphs and models that you get numbers output, turn those into human language. That might be very helpful. So I think by improving the quality of life in these two questions, we will unlock resources for that first part. So at every time, because you don't have to spend so much human resources on these two questions, you can do more of that helping students. You can do more of those face-to-face sessions or team sessions and so on.
Like if the tool could once a week return to the teacher or the facilitator a report, like, here's what's been going on, this stuff is doing really well, these 3 learners might need like an intervention. So like you said, so removing the resource demand on the people facilitating the learning, educators, of just monitoring everything and summarizing that for them. Maybe that's like the bridgeway. Yeah, I mean, we kind of keep coming back to this, and I think certainly now, I think the big advantage is for the educators. There's so much we can do for the educators with these tools to free up their resources, to free up their time, to give them more to work with. So it's kind of funny that, again, in almost all the coverage and stories I've seen, the main thing as well is the essay dead. And our students going to use this to, which, you know, oddly enough, we didn't even really talk about in this last, whatever it's been, hour or something like that.
Yeah.
interesting as well the framing narrative that's happening in the wider discussion.
It is, and yeah, it's difficult to say.
Why do you think that is? Why is everyone focusing on this?
I don't know, maybe because that's the part that everybody feels or have like the strongest memories of having to create something. You know that feeling that I know how this works. I know what I'm supposed to know about this topic. Why do I need to write it down for you? Why can't I just sit down with my teacher and explain that thing to him or her and be done with it? Why do I have to make that 10 pages of essay and cite some old books that are heavy and I need to get from the library or get those articles downloaded online and even pay for those scientific articles and do that? I think that's why it keeps going back there, because that's the sort of like pain that a lot of people have felt. They have felt that this is that part that really sucks about learning. And then it goes back into like, why can't we have those conversations with just people? Well, because the teacher can't be having that conversation with 30 people in university with 130 people.
Yeah.
There's just like no time or no way to validate those and so on. Those like learning results there. So I think that partly explains why we are so stuck in that area.
But here's the question: is that stuff valuable to the learning? Sometimes it sucks and it's frustrating to have to do that writing for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But is it valuable? Like, what's to be said?
Yeah, at least like looking at generally like what contributes to great learning, it's not there topping the charts, writing essays. I think there's the great anecdote about like when you can bring a cheat sheet into your exam. You usually learn that stuff when you are promised that, hey, you can bring your notes. So then before that exam, a student who is like, I'm genius, I'm just gonna like write down everything in my notebook and I'm gonna make really, really good notes to help me with the exam. And then they of course succeed in the exam, but they didn't necessarily succeed because they had the notes in the exam, but because they made the notes.
Went through the process of making the notes.
So actually like having that opportunity to bring your notes into exam is a great learning opportunity. It's a great
motivator.
way to, it promotes learning in ways that in the same way feels like counterintuitive at first, because you're like, well, they're not gonna learn. How can I trust their
what they wrote down?
Yeah, like it's not a good way to measure have they actually learned that thing if they can take the notes there. But I feel like we're just fighting a losing battle with essays and that sort of things in exam format, at least, because there's just so much information available in different channels. You might block ChatGPT. You can always ask your older brother or older sister to do your essay for you. You can ask your parents to help with you, and that's just those luxuries that not every kid has access to. So we're creating kind of like a not very equal world by...
It's a really good point, like democratizing it. There's all sorts of different learners in all kinds of situations out there, and some of them, like you said, just don't have the additional support resources around them. And how can we say that we have a fair system if some people have all the support and some have none?
Yeah.
So I mean it's a really good argument for that. And I don't like disagree that maybe writing an essay in an exam is a poor way to validate someone's knowledge or understanding of a concept. I do still wonder, because it certainly happens to me personally. If I'm thinking about an idea, sometimes the best thing for me to do is to just sit down and start writing about it. Not in any coherent way necessarily, not in a formalized way, but that can lead. I think it's a different style of thinking when you do it, and I think that can sometimes help order your thoughts, and more than just order or structure, like it brings a new understanding. I'm sure you've had the experience as well, where you're doing it and you're like, that sentence, that epiphany sentence is like encapsulates what I'm trying to get at and changes the way that I understand this. So
I think now that we are getting ready to close Planet, sort of like figuring out that, hey, this is the tool that every teacher or person working with learning needs, I think then we need to go back and figure out, all right, what is the tool that every student needs?
This is a very good question.
Because instead of like asking AI to summarize documents for you or generate your essays for you, maybe we should be asking it like, how should I learn this? Like, give me 5 examples of how could I learn from the fall of Rome, for example. And it might be able to provide you with something. If it's not able to do that, you can always train the model. Like, I mean that now we've seen a glimpse of what a general model can do, but next all the companies sort of like are gonna be thinking about training their own models and so on.
Yeah.
So I think the next sort of like a step for AI in education is figuring out what is the tool that everybody taking online courses needs, or traditional courses, and there we're gonna figure out it again.
Interesting tool. Now that's something I really like, and why wouldn't educators and the education world be on board with this? Sort of, tutor. Co-tutor, co-learner. Something
exactly.
like that. That can provide individualized support, but not do the work for you.
Exactly.
Now that's a fun challenge. That's something cool.
And obviously from now people are gonna come up with their own uses and so on, but I think all in all, especially in corporate learning, there's so like niche specific topics that you need to build your courses around, that you can't find direct answers from ChatGPT or something. But you can get that first starting point. You don't have to start from an empty paper. You can start from something. You can get that structure, you can get that introduction or that idea or conversation starters going on. And then you will have to figure out the rest. You will find your missing pieces of information in between. So it's just like, it's speeding up things.
Yeah, and that, that also really plays into, like theories of motivation in learning and learning sciences, right? Like if you can often remove that first little wedge or whatever it is, like you could think of it like a sled going down the hill. You need to run it at the start. And that's what it's, but as long as if you can remove that one little barrier for people, and this is what we can use these AI tools for, then once it's rolling, people can kind of take control of it from there. So that's noble goals.
Indeed. But to sort of like summarize what we've been going on, I think we've been discussing what are the applications, what are the responsible AI and so on. What do you feel like, what would be your like closing thoughts on this? Can you wholeheartedly say that you're excited, or is there something that...
Oh, I'm more than excited. I'm like super excited. I think that the benefits, the already apparent ones, and the potential benefits are vastly outweigh any of the supposed fears or concerns or drawbacks. I think those things are easily challenged, and I think I'm excited as well because, okay, not only is it a whole host of new tools, I think it's going to change a lot of how education and learning is done. I think it's actually going to increase things like critical thinking skills, problem solving skills. These things are really important, and they're really hard to teach. You can't give someone information on it. But I think with things like this, like with the new tools coming out, we can actually create scenarios that get to the heart of those matters and like get people to be more critical about an idea. Because they're not like taking up cognitive load with these base things that we can have done. So it's incredibly exciting, and it's, I think, just going to be a net gain. And it's a fun time. Like it's an absolutely fun time to be active in this industry because, like I said, we're kind of laying some of the groundwork for how this will be used in the future. We get to explore, we get to play with it, and like discover things, and that's kind of like what learning's all about, anyways.
Personally, I haven't been as excited for probably any tool ever than last fall when I got access to the OpenAI and the API to be able to use the text generation Da Vinci model and being just absolutely
Yeah, I remember you're posting things every day.
Yeah, yeah. So you could spend just like, I don't know, 5 hours, 6 hours a day just trying like, what would a Kramer say about online learning? What would Jerry Seinfeld say if he was selling online learning platform and all these sorts of things? And I was just amazed by its ability to figure that out with just like a tiny prompt. So that, at least for personally, was a very big thing, and I was really mind blown from that. And being able to there turn like because it was first like with images and everything, it was just like a gag thing.
Yeah.
Like you would use it for everything not work related. You would like, what is the best pizza dough recipe or something silly from it, and seeing that shift to go to like professional things and so on, and then still like seeing that I can trust this in like a professional environment as well. Like I can see that its suggestions or concepts that I ask about are valid and they actually work. I think that was the second sort of round of like excitement, is that you could actually use this for not just creating a funny image or a Seinfeld joke or something else. So for me, that was like the second part of getting excited about it.
Yeah, and that happened really fast.
Yeah,
that shift from gag to reliable tool was like, cool. Well, anything else? Any other thoughts on GPT?
No,
I just AI.
Yeah, I hope that the third part of excitement is probably seeing our customers old and new taking advantage of what we can offer in this field, and that's gonna be the third big thing for me within 1 year of actually seeing something that we think that this is really great. What do people think about it? What type of, because we have probably figured out only tiny fraction of ways to use it. So what other people come up with, how they can use, well, AI in general or the tools that we offer, that's going to be really exciting to see over the spring.
Yeah, likewise. I'm super excited about the tool that we've come up with. I'm excited to see it go out, and I'm excited to see what we build next.
Yeah.
Hey, I just for fun, before this, I asked ChatGPT to write a sonnet about data analytics. I figured I could read it now at the end, unless you have anything else to say. Would you like to hear the output sonnet?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is a sonnet on data analytics by GPT-3. Data is the new elixir with insights that heal, rescuing us from the unknown we feel. Unlock mysteries and hidden truths. No problem too big, no data too small for its sleuths. The power of analytics shines like the sun, solving complex problems that can't be done. Put aside assumptions and follow the clues. Uncover patterns in the data to be used. It's a tool for the future, the path to success, turning data into insights and answers to questions. From marketing to finance, it's a tool of the trade. Data analytics will never be underpaid. The power of data analytics, a force to be reckoned. It's the key to the future, the answer to our questions. Unlock mysteries and hidden truths. No problem too big, no data too small for its sleuths.
Oh, that is nice.
It's sweet. I
Indeed.
thought so.
Indeed.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I guess with that, we're done for this episode. Thank you for sticking with us and watching, and we'll see you in another one.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
See ya.